Hey, everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of Career Club Live. If you're not familiar with Career Club, please check us out at career.club. On this week's episode, we just like to highlight Next Placement, which is Career Club's innovation in the outplacement category, where we're bringing a more human-centered and empathetic approach to focus not on who's out, but to focus on what's next. So again, you can learn more about Next Placement at career.club. Today's guest is Erich Kurschat, and Erich is the owner of Harmony Insights. Erich is an everything disc expert and a human resources expert. I was Erich's client back in the day and just immediately took a liking not only to his style, but to the quality of the content that he was sharing with our team. And we've become friends over the years. And again, I just have a really high level of respect for Erich. He is also well known in the HR community, and rightfully so, and is the founder of HR Hot Seat. So with that, I'd like to welcome Erich Kurschat.
Good to see you, Bob. Thanks for having me on today.
Hey, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing really well. That was a great intro. I get inspired by you.
Well, I didn't even read it. So, actually, that was good. So where do we find you today?
I am in Downers Grove, our new home, which is west of Chicago, where I lived for quite some time. And then we had a baby and decided we need some more space. So headed out to the suburbs.
No, that is nice. And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
We'll get into all sort of the career stuff. Today's topic is charting a course in HR. I think that we may kind of expand that topic just a little bit around meaningful work. But before we get into all of that, which I know is going to be a very rich conversation, we always like to do just a little bit of an icebreaker with our guests. So this is a little bit of a lightning round kind of a thing. But where were you born and raised?
I was born in Rochester, Michigan, so southeast Michigan, and raised there as well. A small town called Lakeville. Very few people. One stop site. I think it was a three-way stoplight. Tackle shop, bait and tackle shop. That was important to note. And went to high school in Bloomfield Hills, which is a suburb of Detroit, and lived there really until I went to college in Ohio. And now I'm in Chicago. So I'm doing the whole Midwestern thing.
Nice. Well, you anticipated my next question, which is, where'd you go to college?
I went to Kenyon College. It's a small liberal arts school, really tucked away in the cornfields of Amish country, actually, in Ohio. Gambier, Ohio is what the place is called. And, it seemed removed from civilization in a number of ways, but was just the perfect place for me at the time.
That Kenyon has an excellent reputation, and being an Amish country school, we lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for a couple of years, and it's very cool to be around something that seems so different than what you see all the time. It's cool. And then you kind of alluded to it, but just a little bit about your family again. You're married and have a baby.
Yep. I'm married. My wife is a first grade teacher, and we have a baby who just today or tomorrow is turning 11 months. So it is our first. And you would think at 45 years old, I would have this all figured out, living vicariously through my friends. And as it turns out, I still had quite a bit to learn, Bob.
We have four, and we have four grandkids. If I can be of any help to you on that, I'm a couple chapters ahead in the book.
I have your phone number.
Yeah. And then just a little bit, Erich, I had alluded to Harmony, and I alluded to sort of your background in HR, but do you mind just painting a little bit of a picture of your career arc?
I'm happy to. When I graduated college, I got a temp job with Levy Restaurants, who does sports and entertainment food service around the country, as an HR assistant. Really had to learn HR through Levy, and what a great company to learn HR through. I mean, just I learned so much in the 16 years that I spent with Levy. Got promoted a few times, left the director of HR, and decided my reason for leaving a perfectly rewarding, fulfilling job was that I wanted to do more with the DISC personality assessment, which I had learned so much about. And I just realized that I had such a passion for it and wanted to see what else was possible and whether or not I was wired to be self-employed. I'm not sure that I am, even this many years later, but it's been the opportunity of a lifetime to do such rewarding work. So through Harmony Insights, I'm helping companies and consultants bring the DISC personality assessment to life for their teams and their clients, and really have a passion for that primarily.
As I alluded to in the introduction, yeah, I met you as a client. My boss had brought you in for a team meeting, and you did such a great job. And I know that you're delivering on your desire to be making an impact with teams and helping them be more effective using DISC as one of the tools to do that. So keep
Thank you.
doing it. You are perfectly wired for it. And then lastly, what do we find you doing when you're not at work? Sounds like maybe some baby duty, but hobbies or things that you enjoy outside of work?
Plenty of that. Evelyn is the name of our daughter, and she certainly keeps us on our toes. Bob, I don't know if you know this about me, but I have sung classical choral music for several years, ever since high school. And I say I'm a disc nerd, but I'm also a choir nerd. And so I do quite a bit of singing classical choral music primarily, but I've also sung backup for some folks who have passed through the Chicago area. That has been pretty exciting. So a lot of my free time these days goes towards singing and honestly just getting to know this new neighborhood where we live now.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Well, the singing, see, you're right. I learned something new, which is always the fun part of doing stuff like this. So I can add that to my Eric's amazing repertoire of skills and talents. So moving on to what we're going to talk about, and you and I have gotten to know each other over the years, and I just genuinely have a lot of respect for, how you contribute in the HR space. And I know that one of the reasons that you enjoy it is because, and it's like what you just said a minute ago, this is meaningful to you, right? You know that you're making a difference. So one of the pillars that I know that we wanted to talk about in today's conversation is just the notion of meaningful work and what that means to people. We talk a lot about, or we hear people talk a lot about, well, find your passion. And, as long as you're doing something that you love, you'll never work another day in your life. Could you give folks sort of your interpretation of what meaningful work actually means?
It's a good question. And I want to start out with a disclaimer, I suppose. I don't want to make the assumption that everybody is able to pursue meaningful work, that everybody is in a position and has the luxury of time and resources to pursue work that is uniquely rewarding and meaningful for them. Honestly, at some point in our lives, we just need a paycheck. And I want to leave room for that.
Yes.
So in conversations like this, I want to take out the judgment right off the bat and say, if you're just working to earn a living, that is okay. Right? That is admirable. If we are to focus on what meaningful work entails, I think for me, I had to get beyond a significant obstacle. And that obstacle for me was conflating or confusing work that I did really well with work that I was passionate about. Mm. And I think it was really easy for me early on in my corporate HR career to look at some of the things that I did well and said, well, I must have a passion for these things. They must be meaningful to me in one way or another. And some of them certainly were. I don't want to discount, that career that I had in the corporate HR space. But I think once, for example, the DISC assessment came along and I realized that I could bring strengths to the work that I was doing. I could bring certain values that I had to the work that I was doing in a way that aligned much more closely with who I felt I was as an individual and the unique value that I brought to my employer and to the workplace in general. I think that's when I began to really scratch the surface of meaningful, fulfilling work that was aligned with who I felt I was at my core and the value that I brought to the world.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your original caveat, which is, not everybody has the luxury necessarily of air quote meaningful work. Oftentimes when I'm speaking with a client, I will say something about, we hear the word passionate a lot on LinkedIn and, wherever. And I almost kind of set you up for the comment that you made, because it's like, we tell people, like, you don't have to be passionate about it. I mean, sometimes your dream job, and it almost sets a lot of people up for failure, because it's like, well, I don't think I'm in my dream job. I don't think that I'm passionate about hammers and screwdrivers, but that's what we make here at my company. And so, but it should be something that, one, I mean, and this would be particularly for a young person, I'd say this, at least make sure it's something that you don't like. So it's almost a test for negatives. Like, you shouldn't be doing something that you don't care about, like completely or just generally are not aligned to. But it needs to be something ideally that at least you're curious about, you're interested in, that you have some desire, to continue to learn more about it. Because, and maybe we'll get into this in a minute, but, as things continue to change and leaders are looking for agile learners, you need to be interested in what it is that you need to learn more about as technology comes along or business models change or whatever it is that requires you to learn something new. If it's something that you don't care about, like even a little bit, well, then you may want to start carving out a little bit of time to find something that's more rewarding to you and at least light your fire a little bit. But I do want to just underscore the point that you made that I would be aligned to, which is, do you love it? Well, I don't know, but I'm happy. I'm satisfied. It fits the rest of my life sufficiently that I can be with Evelyn, and that's important to me. So it doesn't have to be everything to you all the time. I think that's fair.
I think we can be quick, and I have been myself too, to as I've coached people, because I've done some career coaching, to begin with, well, what are you passionate about? And so a lot of people will say, well, follow the passion and that meaningful work will come. And I've also seen and heard people push back against that and say that if you follow your strengths and your values, that the passion will come from the meaning, and the fulfillment will come from that value alignment or the strengths alignment. You were kind enough to mention Evelyn again. It just reminded me, in most of the disc workshops that I do now, I begin with a slide that is a picture of her. And I say very candidly and honestly, there's no place I would rather be than facilitating disc with you here today, whomever my audience happens to be. The only other place I would rather be is at home, with our 11-month-old. But she's at daycare anyway, and she's not at home. So this is but the point that I make there is that, number one, I'm doing something for a living that I truly love, that I feel is a reflection of me, that I'm passionate about. I'm okay to use that word. But I also keep it in perspective, that I'm driven to do what I do professionally by other things. And Evelyn happens to be one of those other things. And I just, the value of that perspective is just, it's irreplaceable, I think.
Yeah. So it makes me think about a couple of things. One of the things that, with respect to the pandemic and the seismic changes that's caused for people, is the way I say it is, before the pandemic, for a lot of people, the frame was work and life needed to fit into that. So I travel 70% of the time. I've got a 2-hour commute, like whatever, the burden is. But I got to carry that because work is the frame and my life just somehow needs to fit into that. And so I'm not home because daddy's got to work, kind of a message. And the pandemic, and I think in a very good way, has flipped that to where the frame now is my life. And where does work fit in to my life? And I think, that again kind of depressures that work needs to be the most important thing. But no, my family is my life is my most important thing, and work needs to fit into that. And so, that's a big deal. The other just sort of slight story for a second is I wrote our online job course is called Making Your Own Weather. And the intent behind the title is you have more agency than you think that you do, and you're not a victim. You can go make things happen. You have control. And so I found that as I was trying to write it, that I was dabbling and like, hey, I'll try and carve out an hour here and an hour there, and that didn't work. So I took a week off one August. Like, my only purpose this week is to go write this thing. Like, okay, cool. Well, my alarm went off 6:00 that Monday morning, that it was my job to go write this thing. And I'm literally still in bed, head on the pillow, and the alarm goes off. I'm like, oh crap, I've got a term paper I got to go write this week. And like almost immediately, it's like, like, no, the reason you're getting up to do this today is you're going to go help people, and hopefully people you'll never even meet who are going to benefit from some of the things that you'll be able to share with them that they didn't know, that you've had the benefit of learning over time, that you're able to impart to make their search for work easier and more fulfilling. That's worth waking up for. And from that point on, I had no problem writing it because I kind of got centered back on the why, not the what.
Yeah.
And the what became much easier.
something that I picked up along the way that has been helpful to me in very similar terms is whenever I'm thinking I have to do something, reframe it as though I get to do something. And just that, because I think language is powerful, just using a single word a little bit differently really changes your perspective on what your tasks look like for the day, what your opportunities see. Instead of calling them tasks, we can call them opportunities. So,
Yep.
I think we could talk at length about that for sure, but just this value of perspective. Before I may have been going into an office and coming home and I had very distinct work and personal lives, so it was easy for me to decide, well, what's in the frame and what fits into that frame, and then suddenly, I'm working from home. My wife, who's a first grade teacher, is trying to teach a class on Zoom of first graders who are learning on Zoom for the first time ever. We have a new baby who's, sort of in the mix. And you realize that there isn't work-life balance. It's work-life blend, that it's just life. And it's on each of us to determine to what extent we want work to fit in. And again, I even say that with a disclaimer, because I think I would argue that there are some people out there that say I don't have that luxury of determining whether or not work fits in or how it fits in. Like, my life has to be work for the income. And again, I get that. And I understand that. I can appreciate it.
Yeah. And I appreciate that empathetic approach to it, because not everybody's starting from the same spot. And
Right.
we need to do what we need to do sometimes. I think that's one of the things that we admire about previous generations is, Grandpa went to the steel mill every day.
Right.
And now, grandson gets to go to college and have a different life experience because Grandpa went to the steel mill every day. So, so part of our context here today, and you said that, out of school, you went to work for Levy and, we're in the HR function. Can you contextualize why you found HR to be meaningful, and how maybe you might share why HR might be a really good path for some people to choose?
I think I'm so glad you're asking this, because I think the assumption is often made that you have to be a people person to be in HR, that HR is full of people. And
You're stuttering, what?
and I would argue there are a good number of people in human resources. I fell into it, as people often do, because I needed work and got placed at Levy as a temporary HR assistant. And it turned into a wonderful 16-year career in a series of different titles. I had been a psychology major in college. So I knew about myself coming out of college that I was fascinated by other people and what made them tick, why people make the decisions they do. What I think I didn't learn as much as I wish I would have learned was how psychology played out within organizations. I have since learned about IO psychology and thought, oh my gosh, if I knew that was a thing, or if I had paid attention to it at least, when I was in school, I may have gone that route. But this idea that, beyond how psychology can be applied to simply ourselves and our relationships, that it can be applied to the workplace and to organizational, behavior and culture. Oh my goodness. Like, that's what really, I think, inspired me about the HR work that I was beginning to do outside of college. But I still didn't have a full appreciation for what was possible until a few years in, when I had my scope sort of broadened, and I realized that HR is different things in different organizations. And in some companies, it's just, making sure people get paid, they get signed up for benefits, and they get reprimanded when they've done something wrong. Sort of the personnel history to HR. And then you also hear about these forward-thinking organizations where HR is more people and culture. They're literally rebranding their HR departments to put a better foot or more attractive foot forward, where it's not simply about those transactional pieces, but it's about engaging people and inspiring them to do their best work. And yes, ensuring that everybody is sort of aligned around company vision and values, but it's going well beyond those transactional pieces that honestly can become rather mundane, and monotonous for folks who dream big and want something more out of their career. And I just think HR is such a broad, or can be such a broad umbrella, that there's room for so many different values, strengths, and personality styles.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, you don't have to just be a people people person and opt yourself out if you don't, sort of resonate with that personality type. But, again, kind of referencing the pandemic, all of a sudden HR just soared to the front of the class because of hybrid and remote work. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, like all of a sudden they became the CEO's, next most important person in the company. Is like, how do we make this work? Because people are under so much stress. The work environment has changed so radically on the fly. And, I remember at Numerator, I think that our HR team did a phenomenal job of charting uncharted waters, just like how did you figure all this crap out on the fly? Because there was no playbook.
I'll tell you, though, it was a blessing and a curse. And I try very intentionally to surround myself by HR pros who really want to think strategically about the work that they do. Mm-hmm. Again, if their leadership and companies support them in that effort. Sometimes they don't, and they're doing more transactional work. But I'm around a lot of people who want to be a strategic voice in this conversation. And the blessing was that, yes, HR was sort of propelled to the forefront, as indispensable in some way to organizations. The downside was that HR folks started burning out left and right, and I think you heard similar stories come out of healthcare.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to compare, apples to oranges, certainly in terms of the work that is being done in those industries. But to this day, you have HR folks walking away from long held positions saying, you know what, it's just a lot to handle, that and then when I'm supporting our teams, who's supporting me. And so much of the conversation I find myself involved with is, yes, how can you do your best work? How can you connect with the vendors, the resources, the career clubs of the world to ensure that you have the ability to do your best work? But how do you also remain focused on self-care? And who is watching out for you? Who is supporting you when you are supporting your organization, and taking a more holistic approach to this very vital and important work that you've chosen to do?
No, that's such a good call out. And I don't know that I've read very much about what you just said, but I think it also speaks to how tuned in you are to the HR community and, everybody that that is able to express that to you. I think that mental health, and we're not going to go super deep on this one, but mental health awareness, would also be a benefit that's come out of the pandemic. Is that like, hey, these are real people here, not just work producing units. And, Evelyn can't go to daycare because daycare's not open. And now, so we're trying to do our jobs here and, take care of a baby and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like everybody's freaking out. And including, to your point, the HR leader who's trying to help hold up the organization so it doesn't just collapse under the weight of chaos. Yet you can be exhausted by that. And so where are they getting respite?
And not only logistically are the HR folks inviting people back into the workplace, and a big mistake that was made during that time was saying back to work. And we want to distinguish between coming back to work and back to the workplace, because people had been at work the entire time. Inviting people back to the workplace and saying, bring your whole self with you. We heard a lot of that. Bring your whole self with you to work, because we wanted to embrace individuals and everything they had been through. And even those HR pros weren't skilled to handle and to receive what was coming back to work with their teams, the grief and the trauma, and people had lost loved ones and had been sick themselves, and, and the political strife and the social injustices that had taken place during that time was a lot for people to carry on their shoulders back with them to work, and so I think it was a wake-up call to people, HR or not, leaders in general, to say, if you're going to invite people to be their whole selves and bring all of who they are back to work, we have to be in a position to receive and support and celebrate what we're going to see when people do report back to the office. So I think it's an ongoing issue, one that we're still trying to figure out in some ways, but I'm just so grateful that HR in a lot of organizations is being positioned to lead in this way.
Yeah. So this may be a little bit of a forced segue, so I hope it's not, but I think this works. But what I want to kind of start moving towards is DISC, because As HR becomes more strategic and it's not the old personnel department on one side, or it's not always, we're building this wonderful culture and it's, whatever all the cultural things are. There's real work that needs to get done. There's a business here. This isn't a club, right? This is a company that we're all at that needs to be profitable, or if it's a nonprofit organization, needs to be, making an impact in the ways that we've said are important to us. Not just that we all like each other. But what that becomes is that HR oftentimes is the glue that's kind of helping. At least it's the tendons and ligaments that kind of keep things together between bone and muscle, and that requires the ability to speak to different parts of the organization in different ways, in different stakeholders at the company in different ways, and to just really be a master communicator of strategy, policies, as you said earlier, reprimands. There's all kinds of things that HR is responsible for carrying the water on and needs to be able to effectively communicate. So with that, if that's a decent enough bridge, can you talk about just one sort of the basic tenets of DISC, but then also the importance of being able to communicate effectively with people who may not share your communication style?
That cognitive diversity is such a big piece of the puzzle, and I think companies can be quick to attempt to quantify diversity in other ways. We hear a lot about
graphically.
And I mean, all important pieces of the puzzle. I think what gets kind of tossed to the back burner, if acknowledged at all, is this idea of cognitive diversity, how we're showing up to communicate and connect with one another, tackle challenges, etc. So that's one of I love how DISC kind of fits into this diversity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility, etc. conversation. And I'll be the first to say DISC is not the only language that is out there. Assessments in general are so widely used among organizations. Some other popular ones include Myers-Briggs, of course, and Clifton Strengths, which was Strengths Finder. Helpful for enhancing self-awareness, building teams, leading people to meaningful work. Career coaches use this, use assessments fairly regularly for various reasons. DISC is not a one-size-fits-all, but I found that where it really excels is when people say, yes, I want to build a foundation of self-awareness to understand how I prefer to communicate with others and do my best work. In what environments am I going to do my best work? But then also help me step beyond that to strengthen relationships. Once I first understand me, I need to come to know you, Bob, and understand how I may need to adapt my leadership, sales, communication style, etc. along the way to connect more meaningfully and productively with you. It's one thing for me to show up. I know you appreciate and use the Clifton Strengths assessment yourself. It's one thing for me to show up self-aware in the Clifton Strengths that I bring to my work. I think that's a valuable piece of the puzzle. I also want to position DISC as an opportunity for people to say, how can I take what I understand about myself and what I've learned about you and have you leave a conversation with me feeling seen and heard? You want to be led by me or sold to by me or influenced in some way by me because you feel that I'm treating you with respect and acknowledging and celebrating, what you uniquely bring to our team or to our business or fill in the blank. And I think DISC does that fairly well.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to part 1 of this podcast. Make sure to catch part 2 live now, wherever you're watching or listening.